Alright, and here we go. I'm just going to wait a moment for everything to catch up because it should be getting going in just a moment. But welcome. Oh, welcome. Glad to have you all here. We have everything up and moving. I am your Saturday night. Welcome to your Saturday night. Oh, happy Saturday, everyone. As you can imagine, I am as excited as always to jump into this, to get a little artwork done, to be creative with all of you. I've got my brushes, I've got my palette, I've got my paint. I've got kitties who are being very naughty right now because that's what they do. They are very, very naughty. And because they're very, very naughty, occasionally you're going to hear them jumping around and just trying to mess about. They've just been rambunctious this weekend. So, some quick things. I do have captions on should you need them, should you want them. Those are available. Hopefully they are working for you. And other than that, I have my brushes all set, ready to go. I have my paint. And let me just talk for a minute about some of the paints I'm going to be using. So I'm just going to grab a couple here so I can hold them up. And you can see. So tonight I'm going to be using the Cali Art acrylic and the Shuttle Art vintage acrylic. And these are just wonderful paints, and I absolutely love using them. And in case you're new here, I advocate for budget paint supplies. I advocate for budget paint supplies. I encourage people to use budget paint supplies. You do not have to go all out for creativity and enjoyment. But before we get going, depending on where you're joining me, you are going to see a link either in chat or in the description of the video, and that link leads to my website. Now, why would you want to go to my website? That's a great question. So let me just go ahead and give you a couple of reasons really quick. Now, the number one reason that you should hop over there is, of course, if you go to my website, you can get my art, my originals, on canvas, on wood board. You can get my art prints. You can get my t-shirts, my sweaters. I have art bags, like pencil bags and brush bags, and then a large carrier tote, which is really cool, and I like it. But on top of that, there's also a sketchbook that is new. It is available through my website. So go ahead, check it out, or share it with someone that you think might like it. Someone who you think might enjoy either a really cool shirt, or a really fun art print, or a nice new sketchbook. But I'm not going to go ahead. I'm not going to just carry on. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing some more portrait painting. Now, we have had a heck of a journey when it comes to art and the kinds of art that I do on these streams. Last year it was just about 90%, like all the art streams, the painting streams, 90% of it was all abstract art, which is also what I teach in my workshops. And then towards the end of last year, we were doing a lot of kind of impressionistic, semi-surreal artwork. It was fun, it was wonderful, but 2023 has kicked off with these fun portrait paintings. Now, I already have a sketch. Let me go ahead. I'm going to get my palette right out of the way. I'm going to grab some paints. I have a bunch of them, really good ones. Can't recommend them enough. Like this. This is Amethyst. I like it. And before I get too far ahead of myself, of course, we are in my studio space. This is kind of like my little study, my little office. And I do pretty much every stream from here right now. I haven't been doing any outdoor streams lately. I've just been doing these wonderful Saturday paint streams. But let's jump back. So here I have my canvas board, and I actually went ahead and I did a little pre-sketch up before we got going, so I could have something already here. I'm going to actually just kind of jump right into it. I just want to jump right into it because I have some fun that I want to have with you. So the first thing I'm going to be using is actually this wonderful teal. Hopefully you can see that on my brush. So this is a wonderful teal, and this is actually one of those Shuttle Art vintage acrylics. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get some of this teal. I have this wonderful big 1-inch brush. Actually, I think this is larger than a 1-inch brush. Either way, that's what I'm starting with. I'm just going to start to get this in and start to build up what will become kind of the base for this artwork. As you notice, I'm just getting in some kind of block lines. Not lines, but I'm just getting some color in here, some really nice color, because I want to start building up bit by bit, slowly. I'm going to be building in my portrait. And you might already be wondering, what is the theme of our portrait? Is there a theme? And if there's a theme, what is it? Well, we're going to discuss that as I tell you a little bit about what I'm thinking. Just a little. So, what I'm going to be working on, and I like this teal because it's going to give a really cool undertone to everything for once we get moving into more of what's going to be here. But I kind of want to just block in this really cool color. Now, I am being a little, not meticulous, but I have something I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to start working it in. So one of the things that I do sometimes is I think, like, what got me really started on some of my personal journeys? What are some things that inspire me? What are some things that, like, really kind of make a framework by which I create not just my art, but kind of my perspective. So now that I have a bunch of that teal in there, I'm going to be using the same brush. Actually, I'm going to be getting a little bit of gray. That's too much. Actually, just going to start working that in over here. I still want a nice cool tone, but I'm going to be using some of this wonderful gray. Going to be a little messy here. But I have some plans. I have plans. Good plans. I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to do that really quick. I don't want it to be too heavy there. At the same time, I don't want to really lose what I'm doing. So as you can see, I'm just kind of building this in. And this gray tone is going to start to make a portion of how the piece is going to end up. But now that I have that in there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a little bit of white. I'm going to start to work that in. Now, you'll notice I actually have a lot of paint on here. And what I'm doing is a little bit of wet blending right on my canvas. So that's what we're getting right now, is a little bit of wet blending. All with a really big brush, all things considered. But that's part of my goal right now. I want to not just block in some of my colors, but I want to really build in what's going to be here. That's what I'm doing. And actually, I know it's kind of early still, but I'm liking what's occurring. Clean that brush just a little. So let's start talking about some of my, I guess, motivations, inspirations, things that I've taken a lot from over time, over the years. While I do that, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to jump to a different brush really quick. After I find the exact brush I want, which is going to be this number 2 flat brush. I'm going to go a little burnt umber here. No, this is not burnt umber. Raw umber, excuse me. So, one of the things that has kind of been an informative quality in the way that I've developed as a creator has been a number of different very strong kind of, as you can say, visual influences, but also kind of you know, I have words in my mind and I'm trying to get them out. Oh. So there was a lot of actually cartoons when I was growing up that had a strong influence on me. And there was a lot of movies too. And those influences were incredibly strong early on. Incredibly strong. But I started to pick up new influences as time went by. And one of the influences was actually when I was say, getting close to being a teenager. Not actually a teenager, well, yeah, a young teenager. And I had a huge kind of creative influence from Sailor Moon. And it was something that hit me in a very specific way. Now, one of the things that was really interesting to me about Sailor Moon when I was younger is not just that you had a very interesting, very strong cast of women characters, but you had also a lot of different perspectives on life within that group of characters. I'll give you some kind of ideas what I mean. So, it was actually one of the first pieces of what I would consider youth media, where I saw like a really good positive representation. Uh, Take my words as what they are, which is my interpretation of things as I was at that age and the influences had on me. So if you disagree with something I'm saying, feel free to put it in the chat or share your perspective. But there was a really interesting thing that occurred in Sailor Moon, which they had uh, probably some of the first youth media representations I ever saw of LGBTQ characters, LGBTQI plus characters. And for, I guess, people kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have like a whole bunch of characters like that would show up in youth media. And we really had almost no, entirely female led casts of characters that you could think of that way. So it had a very profound effect in that regard, because when you're young, um, the first kind of things that you see that start representing different lives, different ways of being, they can really hit you in a certain way. And there's just something like unbelievable about that. Like how powerful certain things are, how powerful they can be. And how they can just kind of make you go, huh, I just never thought of that. And that was Sailor Moon for me. Like, I never thought of that. I'd never imagined something like that. Now, the character designs were also very interesting to me. I had very little early exposure to, obviously, media from other countries, or at least that I was aware of, outside of British comedies that I used to watch late at night. Um, I don't even know what channel it was coming on, because it was just like I found them one night, and then it's like, hey, I'm gonna watch these. These are awesome. So I didn't have like this huge repository of alternative viewpoints that I could just like tap into. And because I didn't really have those, the ones that I did have, they just became really interesting. And they became really unbelievably powerful. I know I'm rambling a bit right now, but I think that I'm going to go off on a side tangent while I do this, actually. So I think that some of those things, um, some of those early influences we can have in life, they end up sticking with us so much longer, and also having a much larger impact on us as an individual than some other things, which, arguably might have been maybe more culturally relevant or important or anything like that. Hey, happy Saturday. Glad to see you here. Glad to see you here. So there was just like all these different things. And I'm going to go on a few tangents right now because I would like to say that thank goodness that there's actually a lot more access to like various medias, various pop culture type references, all that stuff. Thank goodness that that is a thing that people just have access to now. Because as large as, and I will admit, like I actually had a lot of exposure to a lot of things growing up that I know a lot of people didn't have access to, but thank goodness that there is so much more access. Hey, Silver Fox, glad to see you. Welcome. We're diving right in. So, I know I'm gonna jump back and forth as I describe kind of my thoughts and I paint, but there is an ever-present discussion, and that's just something that we have to acknowledge that. Oh, thank you so much. And there's just so many different types of media that we all have access to now. So the world is. I'm gonna quote. I'm gonna partially quote a movie. The world's not smaller. The world is not smaller because of all of this stuff. And there's actually a lot more in it. So yeah. But yeah, hold on. I'm gonna reference it just because. So yeah, there's this line from Captain Barbossa and Jack Sparrow in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. The world's not smaller. There's just a lot less in it, and I disagree with that. I disagree with it so much, and the more we expand out, and I realize there's context and everything involved in that, but the more we expand out into the world is definitely not smaller for it. And there's definitely more in it because of this privilege we have. And I know not everyone has the privilege, but for those of us who have the privilege of being able to access different ideas and different concepts and different cultures through the internet, through social media, we're richer for it. Whereas, it was really the purview of the privileged at one point in time, like the very privileged, to be able to do things like, know about the world outside your door. And I think that's a wonderful thing that, we have access to now. Or more of us have access to now. And that's this giant world. There's so much in it. And we're all very blessed to be able to access it. Very blessed to be able to access it. So yeah, I'm just going to tick back for a moment. So one of the things that's really kind of moving me forward on what I'm doing right now, and it will be more evident as I go along, and that's, there's a whole, I like that, okay, I'm going to read this out. There's a whole world of new to you if you are willing to seek it. I like that Thank you, Veg. But yeah, I kind of got this like visual in my mind earlier of like what are some things that kind of were influential on me growing up. What are some things that like really left a strong a strong impression? And amongst those things, one of them like really hit home. So I had to be very kind of honest with myself that like the cartoons I used to watch as a kid had like such a huge impact on me. This is gonna look a little odd for a minute, but some of this is still wet, and I kind of, But don't worry, just trust the process. Trust the process. We're gonna be going through a few stages here where it looks a little funny. So yeah, there was just like all of these different influences when I was growing up that kind of fed into a lot of the ways that I started to see the world. And one of the cool things about that was it started to give me a perspective on different ways to view things and different ways to experience things. And I was really, I'm just really grateful for that. So I would like to kind of pay an homage to that with this particular painting and just tap into freaking Twitch just closed out. Stupid robots. I agree. Stupid robots. Stupid robots. So yeah, and with kind of an acknowledgement that like me as I am right now doesn't exist without some of these influences I had growing up. That's just obvious. I think that's obviously true for all of us. Like we don't exist as we currently are. Thank you for the emotes. Thank you. We don't exist as we currently are in a vacuum. If you've ever heard that statement before, I'm sure you understand what I mean. But we don't exist in a vacuum. So there were some things, and I'm going to touch on them again as I move along. There were some things that really had a big influence on me early on. And it was so many things. So many things. But, like, really early in my life, there was just, like, these awesome cartoons. Awesome cartoons. And there was something really cool about getting to see different perspectives and get different viewpoints on things that I thought I understood. And that really can't be said enough. Thought I understood. Because I did not understand. And that's not me being critical of myself so much as just being honest, There's a lot in life that, we do not understand, no matter what we thought at that time. We probably didn't understand it as well as we thought we did. And growing up, like, I felt some of the things that I really enjoyed, I wasn't supposed to enjoy. And if you don't understand what I mean, I will try to make it more clear as I go along. But there was definitely some things that I don't think, people intended for me to enjoy in the way I did. So I'm going to jump off cartoons for a second, and I'm actually just going to talk about one thing really quick. And that is actually, once I find my gray, and that, there we go. Yeah. So there was this movie, Little Shop of Horrors, which, granted we were supposed to, like, it's entertainment, we're supposed to enjoy it. And the songs were awesome, like, the songs were great. And then, like, the cats in the background started making mischief. That has nothing to do with that movie I'm talking about. That's just what's happening right now behind me. Cats are making mischief. Oh my goodness. What are you doing? It's a great movie. It's a great movie. And, we're supposed to side with certain people in that movie. We really are. And there's definitely certain people that we should not side with in that movie. Like, that's just understandably so. There's definitely people in that movie you're not supposed to side with, and there's people that you are. And yes, the songs, oh my god. The songs. The songs are so good. Now, the thing is, depending on who you are, your interpretation of that movie is entirely different. Like, we're supposed to, in a lot of ways, kind of feel bad for Seymour Krelborn. Oh, and of course, yeah, Steve Martin is the dentist. That's just Pete. That's great. You can't talk about that movie without talking about the dentist at least a little bit, because Steve Martin was so good in that, and Bill Murray in his little bit part. But, Seymour Krelborn's character hits very differently depending on who you are. The same thing with Audrey. Their characters are very different depending on the individual watching the movie. For me, I saw Seymour Krelborn, and as much as I empathized with Seymour Krelborn, and, you're like, oh, he's the hero, and for me it was like, oh, Seymour is not a good guy. Yeah, sure, Seymour is, kind of taken advantage of. Oh, most certainly. Voice is pure gold. Seymour is taken advantage of, and in a lot of ways, he's a victim on multiple fronts. I mean, he's an orphan on Skid Row, and, he's treated very poorly by pretty much everyone. But there's a problem. There's a big problem with Seymour. And Seymour takes almost zero convincing to do the wrong thing. Like, he is on... He's right on it. Like, once the option to do the wrong thing comes up, Seymour's like, yep, that's what we're doing. And you can argue with that, and that's fine. You can argue with it, and I will accept argument. But Seymour is not a good guy. In fact, Seymour is only truly able to kind of see the error of his ways when he realizes it impacts him tremendously. Tremendously. He was willing to run away and not deal with Audrey 2, the alien plant. He was willing to just run away and not actually deal with his problems. Oh, all right. That's fair. That's fair. If you haven't seen the movie Little Shop of Horrors, you could be lost. Or if you just haven't seen it in a really long time, you could be lost, and that's fair. But bottom line, quick recap. I'm kind of talking about things that were influential in like when I was growing up, and some things that I've just been thinking about, like where do I get some of my ideas, and like what kind of informs my creative process. But yeah, so just like Seymour Krelborn, great character, and not not a good person, but he's supposed to be the hero of the story. Um, that's fair. That's fair. I'm gonna get to my point though, I guess, because I do have a point here. The people that were kind of taught are the heroes when we're little are not always actually the heroes. The people were encouraged to back the people that are supposed to be the good person. This is really kind of a muddy, questionable territory. He did it all for Audrey. Seymour Krelborn, his entire motivation for um, helping the flower shop, his entire motivation for kind of improving his life, every last thing was so that he could get this woman into his life. Um, Without discussing like a lot of that with her, like no discussion, no discussion. His needs trumped everything. His needs trumped everything. And because his needs trumped everything else in that story, if you look at it with a really critical eye, all Seymour really did was manipulate a situation in order to get the girl, and people lost their lives because of it. Now, he was being manipulated by the plant from outer space, but the point stands. The point stands. And I want Seymour to be a good guy because that's what my mind says he is, but he's not. And because he's not, the whole premise of the movie comes into question. All right. So let me really kind of get off that though, because I had a larger point that I was going to get to, and it went down kind of a long, drawn out other area, and that point is really in perspective. Now I obviously have a lot more perspective now than I did growing up. When we're kids, our perspective, well, it's kind of limited. It's narrow. We can be taught a lot, we can see a lot, but we don't have the critical thinking skills or the point of view that we have later in life, which leaves us unable to see things that should have been obviously wrong when we were growing up. there's a lot that we do see, and we're like, okay, that's wrong, that's wrong. And then there's things that we thought were wrong that we realized later they weren't. It's kind of, yeah, so I'm just going to get off all of that, and I'm going to get back to what I'm doing. But it's thinking about these past events and these past influences that really gets me thinking about, like, what influences my writing, what influences my storytelling, what influences my art, what really, really gets me to this place that I'm in. Like, I don't write truly heroic heroes. And I don't write, I guess, like 100% villains? Sometimes I do. But the heroes, I just don't want to make them like, oh, this is a paragon of heroics. Because number one, it's just unrealistic. Terribly unrealistic. At least most of the time. Number two, like, that's somehow like the weird perspective that we're given by stories. So much classic and traditional media, be it movies or storybooks or kids shows, wants to give us a black and white image. Wants to give us a specific idea about what is good and what is bad. And subjectively, those concepts are oftentimes too complicated to, like, really make, oh, this is good, this is bad. We can draw lines, and we should draw lines between what is definitely, like, not okay and what just seems like it's not okay. And now that's going to bring me back to kind of where I started. So I'm going to tell a little story here really quick. Just a really quick story. So thinking about these early influences in my life and early influences in my storytelling style and these early influences in my work, I have to acknowledge certain things. Just one of those things off the bat is I have a big influence from, the cartoons I used to watch. And as I started off in the beginning saying, like, one of the shows I used to watch growing up was Sailor Moon. But there's a really interesting thing that happened with Sailor Moon when it was brought to the U.S. At least when I was watching it early on in life. So Sailor Moon was, like, quote-unquote sanitized for a U.S. audience. Now, bear in mind, its target audience was children. Like, in Japan, it was a kid's show, and it was for not necessarily younger kids, but kind of like maybe that 12 to 14, Now, the original show in Japan had things that in the 80s and 90s were like really unacceptable for an American audience. And some of those things are things that we're starting to hear about again being unacceptable for kids to hear about. Um, because they removed from the show any references to non-traditional relationships. So let me be more specific. So there was a couple of characters in the show, Malachite and Nephrite. They were villains, by the way. They also were both men, and they had a romantic relationship. Now, when the show came to the U.S., they made, Zoisite and Malachite. I got that wrong. So what they did is they made Zoisite into a woman for the U.S. Dubbing of the show. Like, it was not super subtle for anyone who took the time to look into the show itself. Zoisite was a man. But because Zoisite had kind of this not subservient, but this kind of nurture, loving, emotional kind of role in the relationship, everything. What they did is they changed it so that it was not only a man and a woman, not two men, but they took a character that was perceivably feminine, and they're like, oh, that's a woman. That's a woman. And this would be, I guess, not the worst thing they could have done, except they did it again. In fact, for the American dubs in general, they just kept taking any relationship that was deemed unacceptable for an American audience, and they changed it. They just kept changing them. So, two women together became, oh, they're cousins. And that's not even a joke. That's what they did with the translation. Oh, no, they're cousins. They're cousins. It's fine. Don't worry. Without acknowledging that, like, that makes their behavior even more problematic. Like, oh, no, it's fine. Don't worry. Don't think about it. So I had these shows, and I watched these shows, and I got to learn a lot about these characters, and a lot about these different people. But it opened my mind to a very different way of looking at a lot of these things. It also made me realize, like, how much we try to hide things when it's perceived to be, oh, that's wrong. That's wrong, we can't do that. It's not that it's actually wrong, it's just someone said, well, that's wrong. But then someone else says, oh, that's right, so we can do that. And I know I'm kind of rambly at the moment as I just go over all these thoughts with you. But it's impossible for me to not acknowledge that, like, seeing this stuff growing up had a definite impact on the way I viewed other things growing up. Alright, and just to read this out from Veg Rocker, it's crazy how we're always trying to change people and tell people who they are and how they were born as wrong. Exactly. Yes. Exactly. And, it's wild. It's wild. That's, like, I can't come up with a better way to put it right now because, I'm trying. Obviously, I'm trying. I can come up with a better way to put it, but I'm just working through my thoughts. Working through my thoughts. But we had all of this different stuff. It's been around for like the longest time, and it's had like such a big impact on a lot of people. And it's like, oh, it's fine there, but it's not fine there. That's okay, but this isn't okay. Nope, gotta change all that. It's just like, what in the world is happening? Just so you know, this is not going to be another blonde character. I'm not going to make this character blonde for this, but it goes without saying, yes, this painting does have that influence from thinking about things like Sailor Moon. But I need to light everything. So, I'm putting this yellow down because like the skin I wanted cool, but the hair I'm going to want kind of warm. So that's what I'm doing here. And there's certain places where I also want variance in how the final colors come out. Just building a whole bunch of stuff up. This wonderful color amethyst, and that's actually going down here. But we don't live in a vacuum. And we don't live in a world where everything is neat and everything is tidy and everything fits into a little box. We don't. We don't live in a world where everything always makes sense to everyone. Why is this important? I'm getting to that. Because that ends up affecting all of us in different ways. If we live in a world where things end up going in like so many different ways, where there's so many different perspectives, where there's so many different ideas, like, oh, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's right, that's right, that's right, it can start to become difficult to really understand. Oh, thanks for being here, and thank you so much. Thank you so much. It can start to become really difficult to know, like, what's true here. What is the good thing? What is the bad thing? What is the thing that we need to look out for? I don't always know what I'm going to talk about when I get on. I don't always know, like, specifically, like, what I'm going to paint, how the final piece is going to look. I don't always know what I'm doing. I'm also not afraid to admit that I don't always know. That's something that I struggled with in life. I've definitely been the type of person that, people would have thought of as a know-it-all. I still have those moments where it's just like, you're kind of being a jerk. I'm trying my best sometimes to not be that way. I'm trying my best to be better than that. By the way, portraits are really fun to do. Thank you for those of you who are sticking with this and listening to everything as it goes along. I am completely aware that I'm prone to things like rambling. And it's not even really rambling. So let me stop that. I'm going to stop that thought right now. And we're going to put it in a different way. What I am prone to is kind of trying to put my thoughts together. It's so hard sometimes to put your thoughts together. And if you've ever had those moments where, you find yourself just kind of struggling with, how do I say this? How do I say that? Is what I just said awful? Well, then you're in good company because you're not alone. I do not know always what I'm saying. I'm not always right. But dang it, I'm trying. I'm learning. I'm growing. Now I realize that this portrait is going to be one of those pieces. It's going to be a couple of sessions. And I also know that I've been just talking right along, which hopefully has not been too bad. But I have a lot on my mind. I don't always know where to put it, what to do with it. Do you ever have that problem? This piece is going to be a couple of sessions right now. I have a lot to kind of work out as I build up my layers and my tones. But I'm actually I'm sure you've heard me say this before. I'm really happy with how it's going. It takes a long time to do what you sometimes envision. And it can take a long time to find your way. It can take longer still to get those first steps just right. This piece, like every other I do on here, I'm exploring. Trying to find what's right, what works. Trying to make everything right. You can't make everything right. A little teal, a little white there. It's going to be a few passes before I really get to where I'm headed with this. And I definitely am very grateful for those of you who've joined for this, even knowing that, you know, it might be a bit before we get where we're going. The eyes have ended up a little weird. We are going to fix those. That's one of the reasons I'm using this particular brush right now. The eyes are ending up really... I know. It's I'm just kind of going and trying to put together all my thoughts. But at the end of the day, as long as most of what I've been saying makes sense, that's really what's going to matter. I know it's not all going to make sense, but just as long as most of it does. Now, my paints have not wanted to cooperate the way I wanted them to, but we're still making a really good bit of headway. Progress, essentially. But we're gonna have to go back and forth multiple times. But there's so many different things, like, always going through my mind that I don't always know what to do with. Thoughts and ideas and, like, why do I draw this way? Why do I paint this way? Why do I think this way? Why do my stories come out the way they do. Yeah, this stuff that you think about and you mull over in your brain, but the only way to really kind of make any progress in working that out is like really getting down to it. Which means you have to kind of talk about it a lot. And while you're talking about it, if I don't make sense when I'm talking about this, I am okay with that. I'm really okay with that. Because I'm just working it all out. I'm working it all out. Oh, goodness. Alright. My brush just went ahead and did something. It's okay. Because I can still fix that. I know I'm not done. Fortunately, I've kept the cool lighting I wanted, and really building up all of these layers of shading, shadow, and texture and tone. This is part of that journey. Sometimes making a whoops. But what do I say? In art, you don't really have mistakes. Does this look good right now? No. This looks like what it is, and what it is a beginning. It's a beginning which is going to go somewhere. It's going to end up somewhere. And as it does, I'm just going to find out where it's going. We're going to require a lot more paint. And a lot more play. So thank you for being here for all of this fun. Because it really is. It's fun. I'm not changing my mind on that. This is fun. It's fun. It's experimental. I'm working more and more and more with these changes and transformations of my pigments, of my tones. It doesn't all have to be the same. It doesn't all have to end up in that space. And I end up so much in a space. A certain space, a certain time. Where the painting just starts to feel like, oh, I've seen this one before. been here before. Sometimes that's what it feels like. It's like I've been here before. I've trod this road. I've seen what's at the end. It's not a bad road, it's just... there's no surprise. Should be a little surprise. You know, as far as early paintings go, or the early moments of a painting, this one's really nice. Because it's capturing a feeling. It's starting to build a design. And it's free. I think that's probably the best part. It's free. In case you're wondering, this is going to be a two-part painting video. It is also going to be continuing to experiment and continuing to play. I think that as far as the base goes, I'm now feeling really good, really comfortable with where we're ending up. So that when we get back to this, when we start to play more, it's going to feel really good. It's going to feel like, oh, look, I know where I'm headed. But every painting experience for me has always been a little bit unique, a little bit of a surprise. The end of the road will be the end of the road, and I don't know where that's going to be. The one thing I do know is that I'm glad I've begun it. I'm glad that you've been here for it. I really like that every painting has its own feeling, its own energy. Had so much to say tonight, haven't I? But I'd rather have so much to say. And I'd rather have so much to share, so much to kind of work with, and it's been a treat. A little bit more for the evening before we are done. I'd like to extend just one heck of a gigantic thank you. Goes without saying that in the long run, I'm pretty much sunk if it's not for the really nice people, a really great crowd, wonderful community of you that make this possible. Without you, there is no Your Saturday Night. And thank you for indulging my rambling. I'm just going to call it that for now, rambling. Isn't it fun how it doesn't take a lot of big brush strokes to start to change the composition? So my nose kind of got a little messed up, and I'm going to end up working really hard the next time we get together for this to put it back to the way I wanted, because I kind of flattened it out a lot, and I mean a lot. And because I've done that, it looks really, well, I mean, I already said it looks flat. But we're going to be able to remedy all of that. Little things like this. So I gotta make it a little bit bigger. I'm gonna have to put the shadows back in the next time we get together to try to rebuild some of those, because it's ending up just kind of wide and weird in the bridge. Not in the way I intended. but we are making progress, and that is all I need to do. Progress. So this has been your Saturday night. My paint, I have a lot of it that's still wet, so I need to let it set and dry, because if I keep working it right now, I'm actually going to end up with a bit of a muddy color. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. These portrait paintings have been so much fun. I realize they take longer than the abstract pieces, but that makes them a longer journey for us to share together. So, final thoughts. If you are interested in checking out my website, you can get original artwork, art prints, sweaters, t-shirts, brush bags, pencil bags, and sketchbooks, all there. Well, there's one sketchbook. You can get all of that there, and it would be amazing to have your support. So whether you're watching this now, you're watching it later, replay, whatever it might be, check out my website. But I want you to take care, be excellent, and thanks for coming on a little kind of thought journey with me as we do some painting. There's going to be a lot more of it to come. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Have a great weekend. See you again soon.